new MacBook Pro combines the fundamental qualities of an ultra-portable device with uncompromising performance. With our new design, the product's overall volume has been reduced dramatically. This results in an extremely purposeful and powerful creative tool. It has the best Retina display we've ever put in a notebook. A precisely designed LED spectrum projects through a metal oxide backplane. This yields a remarkably bright, high-contrast picture with a wider color gamut. The larger Force Touch trackpad now provides an expansive area for a whole range of gestures. We've continued to refine our keyboard design to be more accurate and efficient. Dome switches beneath each key have been optimized for a more responsive feel. We're introducing a new way to interact with your notebook. A multi-touch bar provides a more intuitive, more immediate connection to your content. Commands that were once hidden are now visible, easily accessible, and also customizable. In each application, the most relevant controls are displayed dynamically, allowing you to work with greater efficiency. This is also the first Mac with Touch ID. This seamless integration of hardware and software is truly unique to Apple. The speakers have also been completely redesigned to maximize air displacement and project high-fidelity, room-filling sound. At its core, Pro-level processors integrated with high-speed system memory and storage technologies make everything you do faster and more responsive. In a notebook this powerful, thermal management is critical. Thinner, variably spaced fan blades propel air quietly through a nearly solid structure. The new MacBook Pro achieves a design that optimizes both performance and portability. It marks a milestone in the evolution of the Mac.
What's up guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg, taking a look at the all-new MacBook Pros for 2016. These are the first complete redesigns of the MacBook Pro since 2012, so it's been a long time. Now the first thing to know is that there are actually three models. There's the baseline 13-inch as I have here, there's also a 13-inch with a Touch Bar and Touch ID, and the 15-inch with Touch Bar and Touch ID. We're going to take a look at those when they come in later this month, but right now we're going to take a look at the entry-level model, which retails for $14.99. So the baseline model is the only one with a 12-key function row instead of the Touch Bar, which is an OLED display. So with a complete redesign, of course, it gets thinner, lighter, more compact with a better display, a new keyboard design that's more shallow. We also get all new I/O ports with Thunderbolt 3, and they're much more simplified this time. And of course, we get much better specs in addition to the supersized trackpad, which is almost twice the size of the previous model. Also new with this generation for the first time is Space Gray, and that's also joining Silver. So the box itself does reflect that new darker black color, so you'll see that dark black MacBook and Apple logo on the sides, and of course the specs are on the back of the box. So the first thing we have to do is remove the plastic so we can go ahead and lift up the lid. So this is a pretty familiar unboxing if you ever opened up other MacBooks. So once we remove the lid, the first thing we'll see here, of course, is the MacBook in that space gray color. It's a really nice color. Of course, we've seen this already on the 12-inch MacBook, and it's definitely my favorite color. So first up, we have some paperwork. So this packet includes a quick start guide that highlights the major features, as well as some OS X features. We also get some warranty information and a set of white Apple stickers, so you won't find space gray Apple stickers like you get with the MacBook. Now missing here is that microfiber cleaning cloth that used to come with other MacBooks. So beneath that, we'll find a plastic-wrapped 61-watt USB-C power adapter. So this power adapter, of course, is not MagSafe, so it does have a detachable USB-C cable, which I think makes it a little more durable, which means if you damage the cable, you don't have to replace the entire adapter. Now, the adapter is a little simpler this time, so we don't have those pop-out cable management prongs that used to be on the side, but you can still remove the wall adapter. So if you want to add an extension cable or change it out for one of your international adapters, you can do that. Now, speaking of extension cable, you won't find one included with your MacBook anymore. But we do get a 2-meter USB-C cable included in the box. So if you're a fan of MagSafe, unfortunately, that is completely gone. Instead, we charge via the USB-C connector, which also means that any of the USB-C connectors can be used for charging. Now, when you connect the cable, it does make a tone, so you can hear when it's charging, although you no longer see an LED indicator like you did with the MagSafe connector. So the design of the MacBook Pro looks like a combination of the previous MacBook Pro and the new 12-inch MacBook. So we have a much more simplified design that's smaller and more compact, and also loses the lighted Apple logo. Instead, we have an inset Apple logo, which is matched to the color of the MacBook. Unfortunately, this is a requirement thanks to the new thinner display technology, so the backlight can no longer be used to light an Apple logo. Now, the big news here is that it's thinner, narrower, and not as deep, but the biggest news, I think, is that it's much lighter. It's half a pound lighter, so it's 3 pounds, which makes it much more portable. Now, when it comes to the display of the 13-inch MacBook Pro, we have the same resolution as the previous generation, 2560 by 1600. It's good for 224 pixels per inch. So it's a really sharp Retina display, but this new display is 67% brighter with a 67% higher contrast ratio with 25% more color. So like the newest iMacs, the iPad Pros, and the iPhone 7, this is also compliant with the P3 standard for that wider color gamut. So these displays are definitely much brighter with more vivid colors, and that contrast definitely gives the display much more depth. So things look a lot more vibrant compared to the previous generation, which looks muddy compared to this model. They've also significantly reduced glare on the newest panels. You can see this when you compare them side by side. So even though they're very glossy, it does a pretty good job managing the glare. Unfortunately, what hasn't changed at all here is the FaceTime HD camera, which is still 720p. Of course, we do get an LED indicator and an ambient light sensor right next to it. So taking a look at the sides compared to the previous generation, you can see there's big changes here in terms of the I/O, for better or for worse. Now we have Thunderbolt 3 ports along the side. Now these look like USB-C connectors and they function like that as well, but they do support Thunderbolt 3, which of course supports a lot of things like display output and other connections. In fact, they're compatible with basically anything as long as you have the right adapter or as long as they work with USB-C. But these are Thunderbolt 3, which means they support up to 40 gigs per second in terms of throughput and can be daisy-chained. Now, unfortunately, with this model, if you look at the other side, all we have is a headphone jack, and I know what you're saying, at least we have a headphone jack, but if you want additional ports, you're going to have to go to the upgraded model. But of course, this means we lose a lot of other legacy ports like HDMI, standard USB-A connectors, Thunderbolt connectors, and a SD card slot. On the front, as always, is a thumb port for lifting up the display. Now, of course, the hinge is perfectly weighted, so when you lift it up, it doesn't pick up the entire computer. And speaking of that hinge, unlike the previous generation, it is integrated into the chassis design, just like on the 12-inch MacBook. So we have this nice continuous look instead of the black plastic trim piece on the back of the MacBook. The hinge design is also much more compact. It looks very different compared to the previous generation, as does the ventilation. There's much less obvious ventilation on this MacBook. In fact, if you look at the inside of the hinge, you'll find much smaller grills compared to the previous generation, so this does a much better job ventilating without large grill intakes. This also loses the ventilation on the bottom of the chassis from the previous generation. Now, on the bottom of the MacBook, as always, you can remove this back panel, but it's not meant to be user accessible. So this is secured with pentalobular screws, and we do have those plastic feet at all four corners. Returning once again is a Force Touch glass trackpad, but this time it's twice as large as the previous generation. It's almost comically large. At first, I thought this might be difficult to work with because your palms naturally rest on it when you're typing, but there seems to be really good palm rejection, so I can rest my palms directly on it and still operate the trackpad without issue and type like I normally would. Now, Force Touch basically means that this is a static state trackpad, so it doesn't physically move, but it does replicate a physical click. So we have 4 sensors in here that detect the pressure you're applying, and it responds accordingly. And taptic motors underneath replicate a physical click. Now, I have noticed that the taptic click on this trackpad is a little softer than it was on previous generations. I'm not sure if that's related to the size of the trackpad or if they've reprogrammed it just to be a bit softer. Now, I think what concerns most people is the new keyboard, which is a very different design from the previous generation. This uses that same butterfly technology that's also in the 12-inch MacBook, which some people absolutely hate. Now, Apple is referring to this as a new revised second generation of that same technology, technology, and there's definitely a big difference in terms of how it works. The keys are very shallow, and they're much wider, but they're much more solid with a very distinct click. So they definitely have a much more pronounced buckling feel than the previous generation. Now for me, this means the keyboard is extremely fast and accurate. I really like this keyboard. It's better than the 12-inch MacBook and a huge improvement over the old MacBook Pro, which to me feels like typing on a sponge. They're much softer, they wobble, and they're definitely not as solid or as fast as this new keyboard. We also have a much improved backlight. So each key gets its own LED light, and there's much less light leaking, but it's also much more vivid than the previous model. They've also completely redesigned these speakers, so you now see speaker grills on the front on either side of the keyboard. They are much louder with a much deeper range, a much wider feel, and they're much clearer. They sound fantastic and are a huge improvement over the MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air. So let's go ahead and take a listen.
What's up guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg, taking a look at the new Pixel and Pixel XL. These are Google designed smartphones built by HTC. So really this is Google's vision of what they want their Android smartphone to look like. Now both of these phones are running Android 7.1, but they also have a launcher unique to this phone called the Pixel Launcher, which also comes with a feature that's an exclusive to the Pixel at the time of this video, which is the Google Assistant, which has a lot of capabilities which we'll explore later in this video.
In terms of specs, I have the very baseline model. So that comes with a 2 GHz Core i5 dual-core Skylake processor. That's a 6th gen processor. We also get 8 gigs of 1866 MHz RAM. This also comes standard with a 256 gig PCIe-based SSD, so we have very fast storage built in. So next up, I just want to run through some benchmarks to get an idea of the performance of this computer versus the MacBook Air, which Apple says this is replacing. So in terms of our Geekbench for single-core score, we're seeing a pretty high score of 3783 and a pretty impressive multi-core score of around 7300. That's a pretty small bump on the single-core score from the MacBook Air at around 3200, but a significant bump for the multi-core score, which is under 6000. Now the biggest improvement really comes in terms of graphics. So if you look at our graphics benchmark, we're seeing a score of around 28,000 on the new MacBook Pro versus a little under 18,000 for the MacBook Air, so that's a significant increase. Another big difference here is SSD speed. The MacBook Pro has really fast SSDs. It's around 1300 on the write speed and around 2000 on the read speed. That's almost double the performance of the MacBook Air. So if we compare the MacBook Pro to the MacBook Air, there's obviously huge differences here. The new MacBook Pro is actually more compact. It also has a much better display. The MacBook Air still has a TN non-Retina display, as a much lower resolution display, and it definitely suffers in terms of quality. There's a lot of off-axis distortion. And although the MacBook Air display is very bright, it's also very washed out. It doesn't have those vibrant colors or that deep contrast. But ultimately, I think that $500 price difference is really significant. The MacBook Air is still a great computer with even better battery life, 12 hours versus 10 hours, and it's still a powerful computer that gets most things done pretty well. And of course, the MacBook Air still has some of those older connectors like MagSafe, USB-A, and an SD card slot. So in the end, this is really only part of the story of the MacBook Pro lineup. Of course, I will be covering the others, but for now, I think this is a fantastic computer, but it is pretty expensive at $1499. So I'm hoping the price comes down with time. I'm also missing some of the ports along the side, which is going to make things a little harder because I'm going to have to adapt them. But overall, we have a fantastic display, impressive power, a great keyboard, and massive trackpad. We also have a great design, which is lightweight and portable. It definitely looks really good in the space gray. So I'm definitely a big fan of this MacBook Pro, but I'm really looking forward to the upgraded model with Touch ID and the Touch Bar. So make sure you stay tuned for those videos. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up to let me know, and I'll see you again in the next video.